Good afternoon. I am Ann Bennett. I am a family law attorney here at Beresford booth. And for today's webinar topic, I'm going to discuss cryptocurrency in family law actions, which is a topic that has certainly become more popular as of late. And for many people listening, I'm sure that you are asking, well, really, what is cryptocurrency? The definition is that it's a digital currency in which transactions are verified and records are maintained by a decentralized system using cryptography rather than by a centralized authority. So what does that actually mean? And how does that differ from a bank account, for example? So decentralization means there's no regulatory authority or specific institution which holds these assets. So for example, if you deposit $10,000 into a Bank of America account, that is an institution that's regulated by our government. They insure up to a specific amount of your money. You'll get a statement. They will verify you have funds in the account. And that is how you know that there is money in that account. That's not true for crypto assets. So cryptocurrency is held in digital wallets, which are held in exchanges, and there's no bank that holds any of these things specifically. But all records of these transactions are noted in what's called a blockchain. So a blockchain is a public ledger of every transaction for crypto exchanges. So any Bitcoin purchase you can find on a public ledger. That differs from a bank account because obviously that's your private information, subject to regulation, certainly in this country by our government, which is not, that's not going to be publicized on a website or in any sort of ledger. The funds that you have through crypto are held in your digital wallet, which is software or a device that stores these keys or your passwords to access your cryptocurrency. So Bitcoin is held in a digital wallet. You have a specific password allocated to that. Again, this is very different than a bank because you could get $10,000 of cash deposited in your bank account, and then you just know that it's there. You'll get a debit card or credit card, and you can move your funds easily within that institution. Another difference is that you can easily move cryptocurrency from one exchange to another, which is a little different than a bank asset. Because if you have your $10,000 in Bank of America and you decide I want to use Wells Fargo instead, you have to go through the process of taking your funds out, opening a new account, closing the other account, and there is a paper trail for all of these things. Transactions that are reported to the government, things of that nature. That's very different than a cryptocurrency asset. So when I say cryptocurrency, most people think Bitcoin. And Bitcoin has certainly become very popular. Whenever anybody says crypto, they probably think it's synonymous with Bitcoin, but that's not true. While it is the most popular form of online currency, it can be used to purchase tangible assets. It can be used to purchase other crypto assets. You can even sell it for cash. And all of those balances are going to be noted in the blockchain on that public ledger. The second most popular is Ethereum, which is less well known for sure. And Ethereum is used in its own kind of database for its own applications and its own purchases. And so typically more tech savvy people tend to use Ethereum as opposed to Bitcoin in their crypto exchanges. But what is true is that there are thousands of forms of cryptocurrency. So there are more forms of currency in existence than there are cryptocurrency in existence than there are of tangible paper forms of currency. For instance, video gaming companies tend to use their own forms of crypto for video game exchanges. So Gala coin, for example, is used in all Gala games. So if you are playing a game that was created by Gala Games, the company, that is the currency you use in the video game to purchase things, weapons or assets, whatever, within the game. But it also exists as a real form of cryptocurrency outside of a game. And that's just one of 1,000 different examples. So there's also things called non-fungible tokens, which are NFTs. Now, cryptocurrency is used to purchase NFTs, even though non-fungible tokens are not a form of cryptocurrency. NFTs are a digital asset that represents a real world object, like art or music or pictures or things of that nature. Most popular news articles have reported the sale of NFTs of a picture of a meme or something that sold for $500,000. And those were purchased using cryptocurrency. And now that digital asset, the origin of that meme, is held by whoever purchased it with that cryptocurrency. And so how do you know if your spouse has a digital asset? So if they have an NFT, how do you know it's just not a copied and pasted picture of a meme? Or how do you know if they have any Bitcoin? Or how do you know if they have any Ethereum? And that's a question that we get quite often because it's an easy way to hide assets potentially, as many digital wallets are beyond subpoena power. The benefit and detriment of having a crypto exchange is that they are not regulated by any authority. So they very well may not be subject to any subpoena power by the US or by US regulation or law at all. So even if you see a transaction that went to Binance or FTX, which are different types of currency, cryptocurrency exchanges, you can't necessarily get the information directly from that company. There's no brick and mortar place to go. There's no custodian of records to serve. And because it is a global means of exchanging funds, there's no requirement that they be located anywhere specifically. So whereas again, with the Bank of America or a Wells Fargo, they are subject to a regulatory authority here. They must comply with subpoenas, and they will be subject to penalties if they don't. Certainly the newness of crypto exchanges and the fact that they're not regulated make it very difficult to get any information from the source if the person who purchased the cryptocurrency is not being honest about where their funds are being held. Now, if you do think that your spouse does have cryptocurrency, standard clues would be looking on a smartphone or on a computer or a tablet and seeing these crypto exchange apps like Coinbase or Robinhood or Binance or FTX. But if you see an app that you don't recognize, those are certainly ones that are used for crypto exchanges. And it's very often that people that are trading or exchanging cryptocurrency do this from their phone or their tablet and will have an app for it. Now, if you're looking through bank and credit card records and you see large unexplained purchases or things that you don't know, there's a purchase for $10,000, for example, but you don't recognize whatever that was bought, you certainly have a right to know what that information is, whether you're married or going through a divorce or separation. You should certainly have the right to receive those records or receive an explanation as to what that was. Another thing that may evidence there is some crypto exchange going on, is patterns of these small ACH transactions that may be for a cent or 70 cents or something like that. But there's a bunch of little transactions that are listed as ACH transfers to an entity you don't know. And again, whether these are small little cent transactions or large purchases, if you don't know what they are, you certainly have a right to request that information. And transparency is certainly important, whether you're happily married or whether you're going through a separation. The other interesting feature of cryptocurrency is that you can actually search the blockchain yourself. Now, this might take more of a tech savvy person to do, but as there is a public ledger and there is identified every transaction that's been made with respect to these crypto exchanges, you can search the transaction data for any purchase or exchange of this cryptocurrency. So that includes the amount of the currency that was transferred, the sender's address, the receiver's address, and the timestamp for when the transaction occurred. Now, when I say the sender's address and the receiver's address, I am talking about the wallet address, which is a very long string of numbers and letters that looks like a Wi-Fi password that is printed with a router, for example. So the 25 or 30 digit long string of numbers and letters that don't make sense, that is usually a Wi-Fi password for those things. Those are typically the wallet keys or the wallet digital wallet addresses. So you're not entering an email address, you're not entering an IP address, you're entering the wallet address. So if you do find on a computer or written down on pieces of paper somewhere a long string of numbers and letters that is not a Wi-Fi password, then it might be worth searching the blockchain to see if that is associated with any of those transactions. So to search Bitcoin, it's blockchain.com/explorer, and you can just enter in that information and see if anything pops up. To search Ethereum-based transactions, it's ethereumscan.io. But as there are, again, thousands of crypto exchanges, it would depend on which you believe is purchased. So if the wallet address is Ethereum and not Bitcoin, obviously that won't show up on the Bitcoin blockchain. So the other important thing to note is that as opposed to dealing with cash assets, or again, if your spouse is attempting to hide an asset, there is always going to be a digital footprint from the origin of the purchase. So there will always be a trail leading back to whenever this was purchased. And that might not be true of cash or other types of assets that you can't find. So because everything is recorded on the blockchain and it must be done through computers or through software, there is going to be some digital footprint associated with these purchases. And while it may sound very complicated, I'm trying to make it seem less complicated, but I don't know if I'm doing a good job of that. But again, the initial purchase you can always find it somewhere, and that might not be true with other forms of assets. So, the other thing that's important to know is that in 2021, the IRS published 2014-21, which I would encourage everyone to look up if they are interested in cryptocurrency or they do have cryptocurrency, because as of this last tax year for this tax reporting year, digital currency is now considered property, and that is going to be subject to capital gains tax, which means that selling, using, and trading cryptocurrency are all now taxable events. So if you are holding cryptocurrency and you've just decided to hold the Bitcoin and see what happens in the market, that's not a taxable event. But if you bought 10 Bitcoin last year and you've decided to sell it this year, that will be a taxable event. Or if you're trading it for a different form of crypto, or if you're using it to purchase a car, for example, these are all things that are taxable events. And particularly if you file married, filing jointly with your spouse. These are important things to know because the failure to report this type of exchange or this type of transaction may have repercussions for either spouse in the future because the same audit period, the 7-year look back, is going to be applied. So I don't know how well publicized this was, but starting this year, if you haven't filed your taxes yet, it is important to know if you do have those assets and you have used them for anything. I would certainly suggest looking at them over with the CPA and seeing if there is any tax liability related to that. And the other important thing about cryptocurrency is it is certainly, in my experience, the most volatile form of asset that you can have. So as by way of example, exactly this time last year on March 24th, 2021, if you had 10 Bitcoin, you had either $523,000 or $571,000, depending on what time of day you sold. So if you decided to sell at the high point, you would have made $571,000 in US currency. Or if you waited too long and you sold at the low, you might have lost out on about $50,000 there. And then today, if you bought 10 Bitcoin at this time last year and you spent between $523,000 or $571,000, what your value is today is $426,000 or $439,000. Again, this is depending on the time of day that it is. So you may have lost $100,000 to $130,000 if that's what you did. And we have not seen this, even with the volatility of the stock market and the highs and lows of those things. This Bitcoin especially can go up and down quite a bit by a very high percentage per day. So it is important to understand if you or your spouse are investing in this, is it palatable for you to go through these types of highs and lows? And what is the purpose of holding this crypto asset? So cryptocurrency is also important for, or at least the volatility that I just discussed is important when you're talking about a division of assets, because again, by way of the last example, if you did that last year at this time, you were either up $130,000 or down $130,000 if you did it this year. So if you were going through a divorce last year at this time and you decided, okay, I want my spouse to sell and I want to divide the cash between us, then okay, you might have made money on that. But if you said, well, let's hold on to it, and instead took Bitcoin rather than requiring the sale, then you lost money potentially. But again, if you're holding on to that asset, then you are going to be, there's not an actual realization of a gain or loss until you sell or until you transfer that asset. So if you took Bitcoin instead of taking cash, then you are riding the highs and lows of the market. I mean, if you took cash, then it's cash. That's what it is. And again, you can use it for more things and you can deposit it into actual bank accounts, but that's a different, you have a fixed amount at that point. So if you're thinking about a division, then I would say consider the tax consequences, certainly if you're going through a separation or divorce. So if for example, you sold rather than took Bitcoin from your spouse, there will be a tax consequence to that. So there may be a capital gain or capital loss, depending on what the initial purchase was for and what gain or loss you realized at the time of that sale. But again, that's a taxable event. Whereas simply transferring the cryptocurrency between spouses, if you're still married and you do this previous to a decree or a decree of divorce, a decree of legal separation, certainly, then that's a non-taxable event. So there is some value there in tax avoidance to think about. And then I would say consider what the global market looks like when you're deciding, do I want to divide cryptocurrency? Do I want to sell the cryptocurrency? And this is true whether you are, again, happily married or going through any sort of divorce, but a divorce or separation process. But consider what the market is. So if there are regulations being imposed in China that happened a couple months ago, which negatively affected the market. The war in Ukraine has had varying effects, but many people are using crypto as a way to donate to the war effort. So that's had a positive effect. But if you are reading that there's going to be significant regulation imposed on various types of exchanges or various types of cryptocurrencies, that might have a negative effect. And what's important is that nobody can really tell you because we don't have enough of a history to say, well, with each regulation value dips by X percentage, because we just don't know yet. But if you think about the real world consequences, obviously, if you're regulating those exchanges, that's going to affect the way people can use their currency. So that will probably have a negative effect. So if that's happening at the time that you're trying to figure out, do I want to sell? Or if you're going through a divorce and saying, do I want to make my spouse sell the Bitcoin that we have? That would be something important to consider, because if regulations are forthcoming, then you might see a significant dip in what the value is, and you might lose out on an actual fixed dollar value for that. The other issue is that the court's going to want an equitable division, which if let's say one spouse just wants cryptocurrency, it's very difficult for the court to know what that value is going to look like today or a week from now or a month from now. So if it dips significantly, you could lose out on a lot, or you could get significantly more than your spouse, and that might not be equitable. And again, the interesting thing is we simply don't have enough of a history to understand the effect that that has on equitable division. And there really haven't been many cases at this point, just because it's such a new form of holding assets. And I would say transparency is certainly the most important thing. Again, whether you're happily married or whether you are about to be separated or going through a divorce, there are very likely tax consequences to what you're doing. So some people do just buy a couple Bitcoin to hold it and see what happens. But some people, certainly people that are in the tech industry, probably play around with it a bit more than that. So if they're exchanging for different types or new types of coin or whatever it might be, it's very likely that there's a tax consequence there, and certainly something that would need to be discussed with your spouse. So even if, like when I started out, I was cryptocurrency illiterate, even if that is the case with your spouse, it is important to say, well, I bought Bitcoin and then I used it to buy Ethereum. And so this is what it looks like the tax consequence may be. So we have to report it on our 2021 tax return. Another reason transparency is important is because of the market shifts. So if your spouse decides, I want to buy 10 Bitcoin, and then you lose $130,000, that is something important that needs to be discussed. That's a big purchase, just like any other, I would say. So, little purchases here and there may be nominal, who knows, but market shifts and the way that people are using these assets more and more so, that might affect your community values of everything. So if there is a market shift, even if you think you have a nominal amount, I mean, for example, somebody that had one Bitcoin 10 years ago probably has realized about $50,000, $50,000 gain. And that's pretty significant. So it's important to discuss these these purchases or investments, I mean, think about it as the most volatile retirement account you could possibly have, because you know, a $1,000 investment could result in a $100,000 gain, but you simply don't know. We don't have enough information, and we probably won't for several years, which is why discussion and transparency is so important. There also might be estate planning considerations with your spouse as well, because if you did buy 10 Bitcoin, does your spouse know that? And if you happened to get hit by a bus tomorrow, if they don't know that you have Bitcoin, that's never going to be accessible by anybody, because you have a digital wallet, and you are the one that knows where your Bitcoin is. But if nobody else in the world knows that, then that's just going to sit there forever without anybody being able to access it ever. And to illustrate that, I did take some snippets from some, I guess, horror stories, I would say, of people that did invest in cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin, at an earlier stage. Which, again, when you buy Bitcoin, you have a digital wallet with a passcode that is, you know, a series of 25, 30 digits. It's a very long series of numbers that won't make any sense. It's not a standard password. So you will receive that information, and if you lose that information, nobody's going to access your Bitcoin ever again. So the benefit and detriment, again, is that it's only accessible using this information. So somebody can't steal your credit card number or that type of thing. It's the specific passcode that you have. So it is very secure, but almost too secure. For example, Gabriel Abed, who lost about $25 million when he saved his passcode on a laptop. And then when his laptop was reformatted, that was deleted. So he will never be able to access the $25 million in Bitcoin that he has. And that's just going to sit on the ledger without ever being transferred. Another person who actually lost about $250 million has, well, he's tried about 8 times to access his Bitcoin, and he wrote his passcode down on a piece of paper that he inadvertently threw away. It's like throwing away a winning lottery ticket, I suppose. But after 10 attempts to access, you are permanently locked out. And this is interesting because it doesn't affect the currency market in the same way. So if we lost $10,000 in US cash, that's going to have an effect on everyone. That's a little different with Bitcoin because it's such a different type of currency. So his Bitcoin will exist in the market. It'll just be never be transferred, and it won't necessarily affect cryptocurrency certainly in the same way. It's just never going to be accessible. And there are about $275 million worth of these coins that are out there that'll never be transferred and never be accessed by these folks again. So really, the most important things to take away from today are, I would certainly suggest having a discussion with your spouse, again, whether you're happily married or going through any sort of separation action. It is important to understand what you want to do as a community. Do you want to have a safe investment in some banks with low interest rates? If you are a little more capable of dealing with the high risk reward world of cryptocurrency, maybe you put some of your assets in there and see what happens. But this is certainly a new endeavor that many people are attempting to engage in. And it's important to understand really what it means, how it's used, and what can be done from at least a investment perspective. You can sell it, you can exchange it, but deciding these things together. And in terms of your access codes, I would suggest certainly writing them in more than one location and giving them to people that you trust. And certainly identifying that for the purposes of, an estate plan or on a financial declaration form that you give to your spouse or something like that, so that if something does happen to you and you are holding on to these things, that is very important for them to know so they can be accessed in the future. Um, so I hope that this was helpful for helpful more than I hope it answered more questions than it solicits. But if you do want a copy of this presentation, I am happy to email the PowerPoint to anybody that is interested. And certainly if you have any questions about how to find these things or what questions you should be asking, I'm certainly available to help. So thank you for listening today, and maybe we will hear from you in the future.